commander is Hashaton, Scarab's Fist. Hashaton reads: whenever you discard a creature card, you may pay 2 colorless and a blue mana. If you do, create a tap token that's a copy of that card, except it's a 4/4 black zombie. Let's imagine we're starting to play a game. I play a land, pass, land, and I play Hashaton. Tell me what Hashaton does for me in that moment. The answer would be nothing, because Hashaton's ability is dependent on us discarding a creature card. If we have no ability to discard a creature card, then our commander doesn't have the ability to be activated. So my recommendation is that when you're playing Hashaton, make sure that you have a card in hand like this Frantic Search that you can pay for 3 mana. You can draw 2 cards, discard 2 cards, and then untap 3 lands. Cards like this in your collection, or cards like this that you can find, would work extremely well. And my other recommendation is that you play cards like a Witch King of Angmar. What you'll notice is that the Witch King has the ability to gain indestructible if you discard a card. Not only does this just discard you a card, but it also says whenever one or more creatures deal combat damage to you, each opponent sacrifices a creature that dealt combat damage to you this turn, and then the ring will tempt you. The point being is that this is a discard outlet that also at the same time gives you another ability. This is also a 5/3 creature that I'm going to be able to attack my opponents with, and at the same time it's going to create this I'm not going to want to play a card like a Patchwork Gnomes that, while 3 mana, it's cheaper than the Witch King, but all it does when I discard a card from my hand is to regenerate the Patchwork Gnomes. So I would recommend that you play cards like Nezahal, you're playing cards like Ghostly Pilferer, and also make sure you add the Scourge Familiar, because as you discard with the Scourge Familiar, you get to create mana to cast the creatures that you want to copy. So playing Hashaton, we need to make sure we have a way of discarding our creature cards. We also need the mana to create copies of those creatures, and we also need to make sure that we're drawing cards so that we can have creatures in our hand to make copies of, which is why this is my recommendation. If you're playing a super high powered meta, I would not recommend playing this, but what I would play to solve this problem is a card like a Merfolk Looter. What you're going to notice here is that this is 2 mana, so you can play this relatively early. A Merfolk Looter allows you to tap this card, to draw a card, and most importantly, discard a card. There are tons of creatures in Magic the Gathering that have this ability. So if I have 2 or 3 or 4 copies of these cards that allow us to draw a card at the same time we're discarding a card, it's going to put us in a position where we're losing cards, but we're still also gaining the opportunity to get a creature, so that we stay in this place where we're constantly able to refuel the board in case we lose some of our tokens. This is also a form of card draw that, if you'll notice, I don't have to spend any mana to use. I can simply tap this card and it's going to allow me to draw a card. So all the cards that you see here that you can use for this ability, you're going to notice don't cost mana. So because I recommended playing cards that allow you to tap to draw a card, drawing 1 card every single turn is not really going to be something that's going to give you a tremendous amount of advantage. So what I would recommend is playing cards like Alhemerit's Archive, Thought Reflection, Teferi's Ageless Insight that lets you double up on your card draw. So every time I tap my Merfolk Looter to draw a card, instead of drawing 1 card, I will then draw 2 cards, which then I will then discard a card to then create a copy of the creature that I discarded onto the battlefield. And at the same time, while all this is happening, the mana that I have in my mana pool is strictly for either casting spells that I need to cast, but most importantly, It's strictly being used on casting or creating token copies of the creatures that I'm discarding. We really want to make sure that we're creating a deck that allows us to utilize our mana most efficiently so that we can get the most out of playing Hashaton. Now, in Magic the Gathering, there are cards called reanimation spells, which allow us to get creatures that are in our graveyard. Imagining that our Witch King of Angmar is in our graveyard, I can cast a reanimation spell. Witch King would then enter the battlefield and I can play that card. But remember what we said earlier, we only want to spend mana on things that we need to cast and on Hashaton's ability. So instead of playing cards that are going to bring creatures back to the battlefield on a one-time thing, I could play cards like Sheoldred Whispering One that says at the beginning of your upkeep, return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. And listen, if we look at a lot of the cards that have the same type of ability as Sheoldred, we can look at cards like Oversold Cemetery and Palace Siege that are going to put cards back into your hand. We also have Rhea Dawnbringer Debtor's Knell and a Virtue of Persistence that's going to put creatures back onto the battlefield exactly like Sheoldred would. So now that we have the basic generic engine of this deck understood and how you'd want to play this deck, the creatures that we're going to be discarding and casting is also going to be the next important part. We can play creatures that give us some type of advantage, like Solemn Simulacrum, which is going to let us get a basic land and put it onto the battlefield tapped. Or we can play cards like a Duplicant. New players, this is what I would really focus on. Notice that with this Duplicant over here, it says when it enters the battlefield, you can exile a target non-token creature. So in other words, when we cast this card, we get the ability to exile one of our opponent's creatures. And there are tons of creatures in Magic the Gathering that give you the ability to destroy or exile or remove your opponent's creatures. And when you're playing a deck that gives you the ability, if you have a 6 mana creature that we have over here, and I only need to pay 3 mana to cast my 6 mana creature, it puts yourself in a position where your opponent can try to play their commander. Oh no, well, I'll discard this and I'll get this and I'll destroy that. And then I'll pass a turn, and then your opponent will take their turn. And then what'll happen is they'll recast their commander and they'll say go. So now it's my turn. But because I had Sheoldred in play, that Duplicant that I discarded to cast, now at the beginning of my upkeep, re-enters the battlefield, and I'm going to be like, well, I'll destroy that thing again. And then it just turns into this thing where like, okay, well, you play this thing, I'll discard this, I'll do this, now I'll go back to my turn, I'll get it back, and then that thing will happen again. And it just puts your opponents in a position where it's not necessarily the most fun thing to play if you play a lot of removal type cards, but it's so adjust it to according to how you want to play in your play group. But just be aware at its height, it could be played that way. So it's just something to keep in mind, okay? If you like videos like this, guys, remember to make sure that you like the video. And also, if you would like to see a deck list for Hashaton and for me to go over a deck tech with a 100 card deck, let's get this video to 100 likes and to 50 comments. 100 likes and 50 comments tells me that you guys want me to take my time to make that video so you guys can build or buy or just gain ideas for how you would build Hashaton based off of what I could create. Okay, so I always say the same thing when I end these videos. Always remember, everybody, eat healthy, okay? Work out every single day, even if it's just for 5 minutes. And most important, you guys gotta remember to believe in yourself and be grateful for everything that you have in your life, okay? Because gratitude is the... Dude, you could have nothing inside your entire life. You could have nothing going for you. But if you could just be grateful for one thing, that one thing could light up and give you enough energy to accomplish whatever you want to accomplish in your entire life, okay? So just find something, just one thing, just find one thing to be grateful for every single day. Like, I'm grateful for my dog and all my dumb tattoos and this Hashaton over here and this watch that my sister gave me and this play mat of a commander that I rarely play because nobody likes when I play this commander. You guys get the idea, all right? Peace out, people.